when we start talking about the different types of fungicides, there are really two we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss one type of fungicide that actually attacks the disease in the tree, and we call those fungistats. And then you have a fungicide that is stimulating the tree to defend itself against diseases in the tree. And so I know it's two very broad classifications, but most of all our fungicides fall into them. So the first one I'm going to talk about are the actual fungistats. These are the ones that are the chemical that when you put it inside the tree, it actually goes and attacks the disease itself. It's not doing anything to stimulate the tree. There's no usually other benefits to the tree. It is literally circulating through the tree and attacking the tree. Two of the most common ones we use are propiconazole and tebuconazole. They're both in the same Zol family, and they work on a broad array of diseases. But the one thing I want to mention, and this is something that at first Dr. Jim Downer and I did not see eye to eye on, because he was explaining how fungicides do not move in trees. And I'm like, well, we all know that's not accurate. And what he was trying to convey was the fact that when we spray, say, a fungicide, one of these, a fungistat, on the canopy of a tree, it does not absorb through the leaf tissue and then move through the vascular system of the tree. Usually, if we spray a fungicide on the canopy of the tree, it's dealing with the fungus that is a topical fungus, like, say, powdery mildew or something of that nature. It's not actually going into the tree. And so when we soil drench one of these around like the base of a tree, the roots are not going to uptake it and move it into the vascular tissue and move it around the tree. These are not mobile. Most fungicides are not mobile in a tree. So how does that work when we deal with like trunk injection and things of that nature? Well, that's because we're actually physically injecting them directly into that vascular tissue. So it's not moving. It is getting put into the water column of the tree, and the water column of the tree is moving it and dispersing it. So these products, tebuconazole, propioconazoles, these guys, if you did a bark spray with them, they are going to stay right on the bark of the tree. They're not going to penetrate and they're not going to move systemically. And so that was a big point of contention that kind of led to some misnomers about how fungicides really worked in the industry when he first started doing his presentations on this. And so finally, we all kind of came to the understanding of what he was trying to convey, and that most fungicides do not move into tree tissue and distribute throughout a tree unless we make them. And so that's what we pretty much do with this class. And so this one we will use as a foliar spray or usually a trunk injection, and that's it. And if we're using these as a foliar injection, that means we're going after a topical type foliar disease where we're actually getting physical contact with the disease, like say rust or powdery mildew. And then when we do trunk injection, it's the same idea. The disease has to be residing pretty much in the vascular tissue. And then as this moves through that water column and gets distributed through the vascular tissue, it comes in contact with the disease. When it does, it then attacks the disease. So a lot of these, yes, go for it.
Dawn, can I ask a question?
Please.
You did mention soil drenches. If you do a soil drench with a fungistat, are you killing beneficial fungus as well?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So there's also really no benefit to doing the soil drench with the fungistat. So we do try to avoid doing that. Some people did do studies early on where they took fungistats, mixed them with fertilizers, and said, hey, if I can get the tree to uptake the fertilizer, it should be uptaking the fungistat as well. And it does not work that way. So FYI, it was a good theory, but poor in execution. It happens. We got to test everything to see how it works. So when we do deal with these in particular, they are a lot of times pretty old chemistries. These have been around for years and years. They're usually not too terribly expensive. They have not come out with too many brand new chemistries when it comes to these type fungistats. So with that being said, always look for 2 EE labels, because as opposed to putting out a brand new label, they just keep doing additions to the label, and they call them 2 EE expansion labels. So somebody that you treat for, just look for that to make sure you are in compliance when doing applications. So that's just a little FYI. So tebuconazole is a caution label. This one, it's a group 3 fungicide. And I know it's going to sound strange. We have different group classifications on our fungicides. Group 1, group 2, group 3 are the main ones we use in our industry. And so the reason why I point this out is because a lot of times our pests and diseases correlate with the group of fungicide you're dealing with. So say someone put a recommendation out saying, we need to use propiconazole, and you're like, I don't have any, but that's a group 3. It works on this disease. Oh, I got tebuconazole. It's also a group 3. I can use it on this disease. So sometimes it's a quick reference of knowing which one works where. We didn't think tebuconazole was going to stay on the market much longer. There has been research done that shows exposure to tebuconazole in adolescents can cause, let's just say, growth defects in the maturity age of adolescence. And so it really looked like it was going to get pulled from the market, but it hasn't. So people had kind of shied away from the tebuconazole for that reason, but it's not being pulled. It is still a caution label. Cities like caution labels. So therefore, we still see this quite active in the industry. So Qualipro, QP, they're some of the main makers of it. Moget has a caps form of the tebuconazole, and they all work the same as what you'd find with, say, propiconazole. Difference here is the concentration. So propiconazole was designed to be fungicide for foliar as well as trunk injection. Tebuconazole was designed more to be for a foliar spray. So it's a lower percentage. And so it's at a caution label, whereas propazole here, you have it at a warning label. Most cities want to stay away from those warning labels. So usually we don't see propazole being used until we're into like the really virulent diseases that we're definitely going to be doing trunk injection for. So with that, people do contact me on a regular basis going, well, it's got powdery mildew on the label. Yes, it does, under the spray section, because it is definitely a contact spray application. Trunk injection for powdery mildew will do pretty much nothing. It just does not come in contact with the fungal infection at that application methodology. The other one, oh, and yes, 2 EE labels, this is what one looks like. I wanted to toss it in here so you guys were referenced to it, but it'll usually list all the states that the 2 EE label covers, and then it's going to just list out all the diseases they've added to it. So a lot of things like Fusarium from the invasive shot-hole borer, Fusarium for palms, the new Geosmithias that are showing up in canker disease and foamy bark canker disease, they're all on the new labels. So just be aware of that when working with them. The other one that is actually a fungistat, but it actually falls under a group 1. This is not injection. It is solely meant to be a contact application. And it's one of the oldest ones out there. It's the Clearies 336. So we have used this as foliar sprays. We've used this as soil drenches. And I hate to say it, I'm fine with it as a contact foliar type application. The drench that's on the label, I don't know how it ever passed in California. We always have to prove in California that it works. And with the research that Dr. Downer's come out with, it's evident that this product is not really designed to be a soil drench application for uptake and use in plant matter. So just be aware of this one. We use it very sparingly now, unless we're going after a contact application with this one in particular. And so there was some misnomers kind of with scale, black diamond scale, there we go, in palms. And they were saying drench the apical meristem on the palm with this to get rid of the black diamond scale. And unfortunately, we've not seen it being very effective. So with that being said, soil drench with this does not work for black diamond scale, and apical meristem drench does not work with this. It has to be a full absolute covering spray for this to have the effect that you're going for. So
does anything really impact black diamond scale though, Dawn?
Yes,
Oh,
actually,
what?
it's phosphorus. Pretty simple, actually. It's gotta love research, right? Research always finally figures it out for us, but sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So yes, so I'll kind of get into that when I get into the stimulating plant mechanisms. But really quick, these are some of the things that we treat with the fungistat. And what you're going to notice with this pattern, it's everything in the vascular tissue. Like for instance, Dutch elm disease. You can see that black necrosis of the vascular tissue. We're going to put that fungistat in there to go specifically after that disease in the in the vascular tissue. So just be aware of it. It is in our area. It is throughout the West. It is an old disease and it's an old chemistry that treats it. It's just a matter of identifying it because it does kind of look like fire blight. So I get a lot of calls about people saying this is fire blight. We do not have fire blight at this time in our elm trees. So if you see it, odds are it's Dutch elm disease. This one we do an application of injection every 2 years. So it's not something we come back every year, but every 2 years. And you do it as long as the disease is present. The other one is the foamy bark canker disease. Same thing. This is a geosmithia. You're going to be using that probuconazole, tebuconazole as an injection to mitigate this particular disease. And you can see it in there again. The way you always identify it is anytime you cut a branch and you see that black death necrosis ring in the vascular tissue, you know you're dealing with the disease that's internal very much. And that's when we're going to be using those fungistats. Same thing with the Raffaella that the Mediterranean oak borer is vectoring up in like Sonoma Lake area. Same thing again. We're going to be using it with the propocanazoles, the tebuconazoles, as an injection to get it into that vascular tissue for what this beetle is vectoring. So this one was actually tested out in Florida on the what they call the bay laurel disease. And so thank goodness it doesn't kill our oaks as quickly as it kills the bay trees, because it's almost hard to treat it in advance. Here we get some notification the tree is declining and we still have the ability to treat and protect it. But keep in mind with these vascular infections, when we're doing the injection to get that vascular tissue in there, if we've lost the water flow of the column, the water column, you can't get the fungicide to distribute. So that's where we run into issues of clogged or already decayed vascular tissue to the point that the fungistat is not effective. So the one we tend to see that more so on is when we get into the fusariums, especially the fusarium vectored by the shot hole borer. And it's just partly because the borer itself attacks so many times in so many places on the tree that it puts lots of puncture holes in basically what we call the big straw of the water column. Once you got all those puncture holes, you lose the effect of that water column going up through the tree. So you don't have that turgor pressure to pull the water column and distribute the fungal infection, the fungicide. So that's one of the things we have to really pay attention to when we're dealing with these internal fungal infections, is making sure that we still have enough water column vascular movement to distribute that actual fungicide that we're using. So that's kind of one of the tricks to this one. So kind of keep that in mind when using this one. We are using the tree's mechanism, and if that mechanism is broke, then unfortunately it's not going to be effective. Some people have asked me, well, can I just put more injection sites all over the tree to get the fungistat in all over different sections on the tree? Yes, but you're pretty much off label at that point. So almost all of the tree injections give you instructions to be doing them down at the base of the tree, evenly spaced in about 6 inches around the tree. And so if you decide to start going, okay, well, I got compromised vascular tissue, but I want to do injections all over the tree and try and get it to spread out more so that way, you're off label. So that is one issue that has been somewhat addressed. Arbor systems, since they do the least amount of damage with their portal system going into the vascular tissue, they have better chance of doing multiple injection sites all over the tree without it being aesthetically unpleasing or compromising and doing too much wounding of the tree. And so they are looking at, let's say, making their label more vague, which gives you more ability to inject outside the normal parameters on the label. So with that being said, they are working in that direction for some of these. But most times, once that vascular system has been that much disrupted, it is very difficult to really save the tree anyway. So with that being said, got to figure out which ones we can and can't save. So pitch canker is the other one. That is the same thing. It's a vascular infection. And again, we're using the injection of the propiconazole or tebuconazole to combat this one in particular. Now, I will say with this one, it can be reintroduced very easily, very quickly. So if it is in the area, because that's how we tend to see this, it tends to get infested into a stand of trees or a group of trees. Odds are you're going to be coming back to do reapplications as long as the disease is present in the area. It can be vectored by beetles, wind, rain, can be vectored by a lot of things. So unfortunately, as much as we say, yes, when you put the fungicide in there, it goes in, it attacks the disease, it kills it. There is constantly new disease usually being introduced with them when we get it into a stand of trees. So that usually does make this become almost an annual application of trying to suppress and cure this disease on a regular basis. So anytime you guys get into a situation where you might have gotten a property that's got a stand of trees that has the pitch canker in it, step one, go through, and thin, find all the trees that are not savable or of poor structure or, just need to be removed. Do that first, remove as much of the vector load as you possibly can, then come in and treat the rest. And then you may have to do that for a few years once the pressure is out of the area. Okay, and then of course, the other one that is a little less common down here in the urban, but you guys in Utah and Colorado are very familiar with this, and it's the blue stain fungus. And this one will kill the tree as much as the bark beetles will kill the tree. And so a lot of times we've been doing spray applications to, mitigate the pest that vectors this, or trunk injection applications to mitigate the pest. And it's really sad because, people invest all this time, but the problem is all it takes is really one beetle vectoring in this disease. And then over 5 years, maybe even 7 years later, the whole tree still eventually dies, but it's dying from this blue stain fungus. And so you notice it more so when you remove the tree. You're like, oh, well, that's what got in there. It wasn't the beetles. We protected it from the beetles, but this was still allowed to be introduced. So with that being said, doing the fungistat application into the vascular tissue can actually prevent this from killing the tree. I will say this right off. It works so much better as a preventative application than it does as a treatment. And it's partly just because this particular strain of blue stain fungus is incredibly virulent. It spreads very quickly. Whereas we have blue stain in California, we have a black stain in California, and rarely are they the cause of the death of a tree. Not the same in Colorado and Utah. So just be aware of that. Try and get it in preventatively. And a lot of times I tell people, if you're taking the time to do a trunk injection on the tree and protect it from blue stain, you might as well do the trunk injection of the triage or the amamectin benzoate or abamectin, because you're already there, you're already drilling and plugging. The nice part is some of the actual labels call out that you can actually mix the insecticide with the fungicide. So it's a one and done application. And then usually you'll do that every couple to 3 years as needed on that site, as long as there's pressure in the area. So with this one, depending on which type of blue stain you have, it can be an issue, and you really want to be as preventative as possible. Okay, so I have anthracnose on here, and this one gets a little complicated, and forgive me, this is where we start getting into the gray area of fungicides. So when we talk about anthracnose, there's different strains and they attack different tree types. So on our right, we have our elm, our ash, and our oak anthracnose. So notice how on our elm anthracnose, you get these really cool diamond-shaped wounds. That is how it presents on our elm trees. Our ash trees gets that more sort of a marginal burning, like maybe you've had a herbicide or fertilizer burn. And of course, on our oaks, it tends to be more spotty. It actually looks very similar to what we get on our sycamore trees. So the difference is any tree but a sycamore, we have to use the fungistat. The infection is more so in the vascular tissue, and we're actually going after it. Whereas in our sycamores, we can get away with using the sycamore tree's defense mechanism. And so we'll go use a different type of fungicide, usually a phosphorus, to stimulate the tree to protect itself. So with that being said, there does get some confusion when we get down at the ground level of the actual fungal infections themselves and how they present on different trees. So can you use a fungistat, a propiconazole or tebuconazole on sycamores? Yes. So if you don't want to play that game, no problem. Just put on the logbooks. We use a fungistat for all of our fungal infections for anthracnose. So that's one way to solve that issue. But I'll tell you, there is a reason why we tend to use the phosphorus on the anthracnose coming up. So then we have powdery mildew. And so notice how I have all these fun little options down here for powdery mildew. And I have propozole, our fungistat, right smack in the middle. Yes, you can use it as a foliar spray to mitigate powdery mildew, only as a foliar spray. Put it into the vascular tissue, let the vascular tissue distribute it, does nothing. But we tend not to use that because we're spraying out a warning label product all over the canopy of a tree, which means someone's probably going to freak out. So we try to avoid doing that if we can. So we have other options we can do. If it's a minor infection, you can go over to a 25B product. 25B products are just made from plant extracts. They are done as a spray, but you're just spraying out botanical oils. So a lot of times people are much less offended and panicked by it when you're like, oh no, look, it's a caution label. It's just made from plant extracts. And the label will say like thyme and rosemary and things of that nature. We try and do that one preventively if we can, or if we have minor infections. If your entire tree is white with powdery mildew, it's not going to do a whole lot. It'll knock it back a bit, but it's not going to clear it up. So it does have some curative properties, but not for major infections. And then we start thinking outside the box when we go over to our plant growth regulators. So keep that in mind. We have other ways that we can stimulate a tree's defense mechanism beyond just fungicides. So getting into that, we're going to get into the fungicides that stimulate the tree's defense mechanisms. Pretty short and simple. This is the second class of fungicides that we tend to use. The main one is phosphorus. And so phosphorus, you know, we have NPK, right? We got our phosphorus in there for our main nutrients that we give trees. And part of that is the reason is because trees need that for their defense mechanisms. And basically what it does is when you give a tree a high dose of phosphorus, it's going to stimulate that tree's defense mechanisms. It's going to respond and say, okay, something's wrong. I need to start thickening up my cell walls. It needs to start stimulating, creating its defense compounds. And so that is how phosphorus works. Problem with that is it's not instantaneous. It's not coming in contact with the disease, attacking it and eliminating it. It's stimulating the tree. And we know trees never grow as fast as we want them to, or they grow too fast sometimes. But problem is we need the tree to grow and defend itself. So it's going to take time. So like if you have a bleeding canker on a tree and it's weeping and oozing and you do this application, it's going to take about 6 months for that tree to thicken up its cell walls, identify the compartmental or the compromised cells and compartmentalize them and seal them off and stop the weeping. So it is very effective to do this with a tree. We run into issues when a tree is not healthy enough to defend itself. So we have some tricks that we kind of talk about when using this methodology. But this one is really a great one to do because usually, like I said, it's affecting the tree. So if you do a phosphorus application, about 2 weeks after the application, maybe 3, you got to flush a new growth because you have triggered that tree to say something's wrong. And usually their initial reaction is put on new growth because now I'm going to get as much photosynthesis and everything as I possibly can and get good uptake going. So with that being said, it's a great visual reaction for your customer because they see something happening. But that is just a reaction. It might not actually be doing anything to mitigate the disease that it's currently combating. And so that's why I say when you have a fungistat, you see no outward signs usually of using it. You just see the disease, being suppressed. You might stop seeing the weeping of the foamy bark canker disease or what. But with phosphorus, you see a physical reaction, which every customer loves to see. So these are some of the things that it does. So it's in there, it's thickening the cell walls, it's increasing the plant's defense mechanisms. And it's triggering what they call the hypersensitive response, which is what it does to identify compromised cells. So, and then this is what's kind of interesting. This is where people get a little confused between fungistats and what phosphorus does, because this actually does prevent the development of spores. And people are like, well, then it must be attacking it. No, it's just not making it conducive to do it. So there's a lot of things that actually happen in the cytoplasm that's triggering this effect internally in the plant. But it's not actually a fungustat. It's not attacking, it's changing the parameters of the tree itself to make it uninhabitable for the fungal infections. Okay, so some of the most common ones that are used are Phosphajet, Reliant, Rampart. I used to have Agrifos up here as like my #1, and Agrifos is going off the market. Agrifos didn't really spend a lot of time expanding their labels, and it was more of a ag product. And so they've stopped putting it into the TO market, and it's just fading away. So odds are you're going to be working with Arborphos from Moget, or Whippet from Arbor Systems, Phosphajet, Reliant, or Rampart. Those are going to be your main ones. All their labels are slightly different. So keep that in mind. All of them are an injection label of some sort. Almost all of them are a soil drench. Most of them have bark spray, but not all of them. Phosphajet, Reliant have the bark spray, and that's a very common backup to doing an application with this one. You can soil drench it, you can do a bark spray, or you can do a trunk injection. But this is where I warn you on this one. You have to get enough of the product into the plant material to trigger this hypersensitive defense. So with that being said, we have, phosphorus in most of our fertilizers. And my gosh, we have some phosphorus that are like, a 0, 40, 0. And they're trying to have the same effect of putting in a large amount to trigger the tree's effect. Bark sprays do it very well. Trunk injection does it very well. The soil applications are hit and miss. And it just depends if you have something like a root rot going on where you're trying to mitigate that disease. Unfortunately, your roots are compromised. You're not going to get that uptake. You're not going to get that triggering effect you're looking for. So you pretty much have to go to the bark spray or the trunk injection. And so I tend to say if you're truly going after a fungal infection, you're really better off going bark spray or trunk injection. I don't tend to advocate for a soil application unless I know roots are not my issue, and I know that I'm getting good uptake by this tree. So if there's any sort of uptake or canopy thinning, I tend to avoid doing that soil application with the product. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is Botryosphaeric canker, because this is one of the main ones that we cure with phosphorus, and it works incredibly well. But again, it takes time. So bot canker tends to come out in the warmer temperatures. June, July, August. Everyone says it looks like fire blight. Yeah, I get it. It does. The branch dies, the leaves hang on. But the thing is you're going to find the canker of it, right? It's a canker disease. And it's usually that canker that's causing the girdling effect that causes the branch to die and the leaves to hang on. So with that being said, fire blight is definitely, a bacterial infection. You don't want to mistake the two. We treat them very differently. But in this case, all you have to do is look to where the dieback starts and see if you can find that cankering effect, and you'll know pretty easily that you got bot canker. It's also time of year. Fire blight comes out nice and early when it's cool. Bot canker comes out when it's nice and warm. But the application timing is the same. And here's the reason. Remember, bot canker comes out when it's warm. So that means we have to be hitting it a good 4 to 6 months prior to when this disease is going to be wanting to show up, because we need that tree to be stimulated and protecting itself from this disease that much prior to react to it. So that's why we talk about, if you see bot canker, you're way too late, put it on your list for, we don't tend to say fall, but fall works. We tend to say early spring is the best application time if you have bot canker and you're combating it. We say do it in the fall if you're getting something like anthracnose in there, because anthracnose comes out so much earlier. So that's why when we talk about, it's not my next slide, darn it, it was supposed to be, anthracnose, we tend to say, do your sycamore applications in the fall, because then you have a good 4 months at least before the trees leaf out, and you can protect the tree against the anthracnose. and it'll protect it against the Botryosphaeria canker. That's why we tend to use phosphorus on our sycamore anthracnose, not our other anthracnoses, but only our sycamore, because we're also getting the bot canker with it. We get a lot of bot canker in our pear trees and our sycamore trees. It's very common and very misdiagnosed. So a lot of people say, oh, I got anthracnose into my branches. You get a little closer and you look and, oh, funny, I got a canker there. Huh, okay. And so you can visually tell the difference. So with that being said, that's why we tend to use the phosphorus on our sycamore anthracnose. All right, same with the black diamond scale. We use the phosphorus on it. And I have to say, I've seen the soil applications, the soil liquid applications sometimes work. And it's just one of those things. It's so hard because there's probably about 12 trees in the line and it worked on 2 of them. And it's like, oh, okay. So we know those trees got the product uptaked and they cleaned up. This is a one and done application usually. You put the phosphorus in, however, it works. The new fronds come out. There's no infection on them. The old fronds don't reinfest the new ones, so we don't want to prune them off. We just let them drop off to their natural state. But the thing is you'll know right away. You'll usually do this as an application in the fall. And when the new fronds come out in the spring, they look all clean. And so all of a sudden when you got 2 that come out clean and the other 10 that don't, you're like, oh, now I'm stuck, because we don't usually want to do any of these applications in our warm temperatures. We never want to treat palms above 80 degrees. They have very little canopy. If you have a misapplication, you can do a lot of damage and kill them pretty quick. So we always try and say do this treatment in the fall. So since our timing's kind of narrow, I tend to say just do the trunk injection of the phosphorus. You're guaranteed to get the full dose in. You know you're going to clean it up. The customer's going to be happy. And that's kind of been my experience with it. But just know that this disease only gets into the California fan palm, the ones with the bigger, beefier trunks, not the Mexican fan palm. But if you happen to get a hybrid,
the car is parked, if it's on the street, to mark US.
Nope, sorry. Thought that was a question, street trees. No, I get it. So if you do happen to not be able to identify if you have a Mexican or a California fan palm, odds are it's hybridized and it's still susceptible to this disease. So just be aware of it. And because it has a tendency of getting people to prune the old fronds off too soon, we usually almost always run into nutrient deficiencies. You'll start to see these palms lean. The apicobacterium kind of do a little lean thing. And it's just because that's a micronutrient, that's a nutrient reaction. So when we cut off all these fronds too soon, the old fronds can't give their nutrients to the new fronds. The new material just starts to decline and it starts to bend. So always try and do a nutrient application along with your black diamond scale applications. So you can do as a soil drench or trunk injection at the same time, but make sure if you're going to do an application of any type to a palm tree, make sure it's a liquid application. Study just came out. It was actually from Santa Barbara, and they showed that granular applications on palm trees are pretty much useless because we're not getting enough water to really break it down and move it into the true root ball of the palm itself, whether that's a wettable powder or things of that nature. So basically the story came out that we should all be using liquid fertilizers on our palm trees. So keep that in mind. And then the other one that we really deal with our palms is pink rot. It's very common and very overlooked. And again, we use phosphorus for this because we're stimulating the palm's defense mechanism. So pink rot is inherently pink. The fungal spores are pink. So if you actually pull a frond off, you'll see that pink in there. We never get to see that usually unless someone's up there actually doing the pruning. Usually when you look up, you're going to see black or brown striations on the backside of the palm. And that is going to be your indicator that you probably have pink rot in there. It's usually due to damage, whether it's by rodents or pruning or other fronds touching each other and rubbing. This is a secondary invader that gets into those open wound sites. We can't cure it, unfortunately. All we can do is stimulate the palm to kind of defend itself and protect itself with the phosphorus. So keep that in mind with this one. Pruning at ideal times, keeping palm trees from rubbing on each other, and trying to keep rodents out of palm trees. That's always a fun game. So that's how we would do that. The other one we use phosphorus for a lot is sudden oak death. And so all you guys who aren't in Northern California and dealing with sudden oak death, just know it's the same thing for almost all phytophthora. we have over 300 Phytophthora species in California alone. There's so many different types of Phytophthora out there across the West and everything. But the whole idea is all the Phytophoras we use phosphorus on. And the reason is it's one of those situations we're stimulating that tree to find that infection and to compartmentalize that infection. We've seen the best result with that. And a lot of it is because when we do trunk injection, we move it into the vascular tissue and it distributes. Well, a lot of times we can miss these sites, especially like in sudden oak death where it's at the bottom, or when it's out in the roots for like a type of fungal infection, like a root rot or something. So that's why we found the phosphorus stimulation works much better than the actual fungicides when it comes to combating these Phytophthora infections. So with that being said, whether it's sudden oak death or root rot or some branch infection of Phytophthora, we use phosphorus. The trick of this one is knowing what your tree is and how to apply it. So a lot of times, like with sudden oak death, we can get in a big old mature oak. Anything larger than 20 inches in diameter, we want to do a trunk injection application on. Bark sprays have been proven to be not as effective on larger diameter trees, and it's just because we can't get the good penetration with the bark spray. The smaller diameter trees, by all means, use the bark spray. Your difference in timing is you're going to do an annual spray for bark sprays to combat this fungal Phytophthora infections. If you're doing trunk injection, you're doing it every 2 years. So you're not drilling holes every year, which is great. But that just means you have to kind of know what the tree is doing, and you might have different application methodologies on the same site. Can you do trunk injection on smaller trees? Yes. But bark sprays go a lot faster. So we can get a lot more trees done quicker with the bark spray application. And so with that being said, any of the Phytophthora infections, we're using phosphorus. It just depends on the size of the tree to get which application methodology we're going to use to treat it. Any questions on the Phytophoras? Because there are a lot of them. Okay, so keep in mind, we get a lot of like Phytophthora infections in our branches. Same thing, you're gonna get that weeping, bleeding. That's what you're going to identify. You're gonna look up and say, oh, I've got this weeping, bleeding spot. Odds are it's a Phytophthora. Once you do your application of phosphorus, give it about 6 months, 4 to 6 months before you see that site stop weeping. So it's not gonna be instantaneous because the tree is reacting, right? So with that being said, just kind of keep that in mind and let the customer know, because they always like to see things immediately. So the one thing that we have to talk about a little bit is micronutrients, because micronutrients are also a part of the defense compounds. So we put phosphorus into the tree and we say, trigger your defense compounds. And it's like, yes, all right. And then all of a sudden nothing happens. Maybe get a tiny flush of growth, but we're not eliminating that fungal infection we're going after. And odds are it's because the tree doesn't have the micronutrients it needs to create those defense compounds to combat the infection. So whenever we're doing the phosphorus applications, you want to make sure you have some sort of micronutrients with it, unless you've gone through and you've done your soil tests and everything looks awesome and you have all your micronutrients available, then by all means. But the problem is a lot of times our micronutrients are tied up because we have alkaline water or we have alkaline soils, which means high pH, right? Especially you guys out in Utah and Colorado, good luck. So you guys are almost always looking for some way to add in micronutrients. And so with that being said, if you're going to do a phosphorus application and you know you don't have micronutrients, your tree is already kind of yellow, it's already showing chlorosis, you're going to have to add those micronutrients to give that tree the ability to create the defense compounds that you're trying to trigger with that phosphorus. And so that's when we don't see a reaction. So what the main ones that we work with a lot is iron, manganese, boron, zinc, and copper. Those are the main ones that we do in our defense compounds. Don't get me wrong, calcium plays a huge part. But these are the guys that we use for our micronutrients that actually trigger a lot of those defense compounds. So, and this is where I'll just throw it up here quickly, and I'll include this in slides where it's a webinar. And it's just because it's the law of minimums. And this is something that people kind of miss when we're working with trees. Is so say you have one micronutrient that is lacking. That tree will only ever be as healthy as what that one micronutrient can provide. So it's It's one of those situations you might have plenty of all the others, but maybe that one, I don't know, boron is lacking. And then all of a sudden it doesn't have the nutrients to make those defense compounds. That's as best as you're ever going to be. So that's why a lot of times we say put down a micronutrient mix to make sure that you're covered for all the issues you're running into. So that way you don't have this minimum effect. Because a lot of times that's what people will say is, wow, the tree looked a little better, but it didn't get a lot better. And I probably should have put a slide in here of the oak tree that we just did. And it was the same thing. They treated it, it looked better, but it didn't look great. And so we went back the second year, did the application of phosphorus with a micronutrient drench, and it looked a lot better. It was like, okay, so we found out that was our issue. The tree wanted to stimulate, it wanted to protect itself. It just didn't have the ability to, it was lacking the nutrients to do it. So a lot of times we use things like NutriRoot because it's got micronutrients in it. It's also got kelp and humates and humectants to help hold it in the root zone. So that's a good option to add in when you're doing those applications. The other one is Mic Drop. And I just recently discovered this one when I came to Target. It's part of their turf fuel line, which turf fuel, not tree fuel. So I was a little skeptical until I started messing with it. But basically what it is, it's super chelated micronutrients. So anything you put in, it's chelated, which means it's immediately available for the tree to uptake. So whereas a lot of our micronutrients, break down, we want them to be available over a longer period of time because they're trees, they take longer, right? This was designed immediately for turf. And so the nutrients are all available immediately for turf. So when we started doing our phosphorus applications, we started doing this with this Mic Drop, and it was amazing. Within 2 to 3 weeks, we'd get results of changing of the canopy color and appearance, which is kind of unheard of because trees take a long time to react. But that's just how chelated the product is and how it's designed to be taken up. So if you guys want to play around with it, let me know. I was kind of amazed with it. And I probably should have put those oak photos in. So the last thing I want to talk on is not a fungicide, but a plant growth regulator. But we were talking about how do we stimulate trees' defense mechanisms through fungicides. Well, it's not all fungicides. Plant growth regulators do the same thing. So paclobutrazol is the main one we use. And it's doing the same idea of it is causing the defense compounds to trigger in a tree. So we only have a couple minutes left. I know you guys are all pretty well versed in using plant growth regulators, so I'm not going to dwell on this. But the whole idea is we have to put the application down in the fall or summer so the plant can trigger and communicate the changes. If you put it down in spring, it's kind of lost because the communication has already happened and you don't get really real effect that year. And then these are the changes that we see. Okay, and so the one that we're focusing on here is the disease resistance as a secondary effect. We don't care that we're shrinking the elongation and reducing the amount of pruning we have to do. We're mainly started playing with this because of drought. And then we found all these disease effects that were coming along with it as well. So basically what's happening is we kind of use this as an example. It's just the energy theory. Tree puts most of its energy into shoot growth and then in some into reproduction, root, defense, storage. Well, what happens when we reduce that shoot growth? It has all that energy it has to redistribute. And a lot of it goes into defense compounds, more so than anything else. Don't get me wrong. I love the fine root hair growth for the drought and getting up water, but a lot of it goes into those defense compounds. So with that being said, yeah, we prune less, but more so we get things like reduction of diameter growth. Yeah, I like this one. Sorry, this one entertained me. These guys have been using paclobutrazol for years, which makes sense because they don't want these trees to continue to grow in diameter. So that being said, we use it more for damaged roots, people harming roots and getting that new root growth. But a lot of it has to do with drought. That's when we started playing with this. And we started playing with it in drought. Basically, it was those fine root hairs picking up more water. Well, then that's when this started coming out. We're like, it works as a fungicide. Nobody's labeling it as a fungicide. Nobody wants to go down that road of taking the time to make it a fungicide. There's more regulations when you put things as a fungicide. So it will stay as a plant growth regulator with an EPA label to that effect. But we know the effects that we can get out of it. The main ones are anthracnose, works incredibly well. And the way it works is it actually makes the leaf a little bit smaller, but you can see the shininess of that cuticle layer. it's much thicker. It actually inhibits the fungal spores from attaching and creating that infection adhering to it. So we're again changing the physiology, not so much internally to protect it, but creating it from stopping the infection in the first place. Same with leaf spots. I've seen this more. We've used it more on pear trees out here, but you guys out in Utah and Colorado, you pretty much use it more so on the aspens. We also use it on our redwood trees. And the reason why we talk about this with our redwood trees is because not that it's a great way to get them to take up more water. There's literally not enough water available for them. It's for the cytospora cankers that come in. We get a lot of cytospora canker on our redwood trees once they've become drought stressed. And so if we can mitigate the drought stress, that's great. 9 times out of 10, we can't convince people to put enough water on to truly mitigate the drought stress. So we'll add in short stop to the watering regimen to try and get to formulate more roots, get more water, but as well get those defense compounds going to stop that cytospora canker from infecting. You can see it right there, quick close up. That's what it looks like. People tend to overlook it all the time. And this was just another example of trees being treated with that paclobutrazol to stimulate the defense compounds against those fungal infections. So with that being said, it's one of those things we tend to think outside the box with this, but we just want people to be aware that yes, fungicides have their place, but sometimes we can just change the cultural environment or how the tree is defending itself without actually having to go down the road of fungicides. So with that being said, that's kind of my presentation. I wanted to leave a little bit of time for any sort of questions because that's a lot of information. And I just kind of want to give you guys a chance to ask any questions you might have. And if for some reason you don't want to ask in the group, you're driving or what have you, I get it. This is my contact information. You can shoot me a text or an email afterwards. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. All right. So
Dawn, I had a couple questions and I put them in the chat. This is Sarah. Hi,
okay,
Dawn.
let's start at the top. Just curious, has anyone in California seen this blue stain fungus? Yes. Yes, we have our blue stain fungus up in like Arnold, Groveland, up through that area. It's actually really bad. So yes, unfortunately, yes.
I've actually seen that a lot in the South Bay after we've removed Monterey pines that are dead. So we think that they died from the beetles, but then you cut them open and you see the blue stain in the stump.
Okay, that's kind of new and interesting because I hadn't heard of it being down in the Monterey area yet, but
in San Jose.
Huh. I would love to lay eyes on that one.
That was like years ago. I don't know how often it happened, but I remember it happening a couple of times when I was on a job.
Interesting. Well, there are some other secondary infections that can come in, but I mean, it's pretty distinctly blue. It's kind of hard to miss.
Yeah.
So, yes. So yeah, and just so you guys know, if you guys are seeing something like that, definitely say something. It's one of those things where it gets people talking, it gets us looking in to see what might be going on. And sometimes it leads us into a direction of now we're treating, red turpentine beetle with triage and propiconazole or something of that nature, just because of a potential that's been vectored into an area. Because that's what happens with these diseases. They get vectored into an area by a pest, and then they spread in that area. And sometimes we can contain them in that area, and then sometimes they just keep spreading throughout. So, okay, Dawn, what's the difference between phosphorus acid and phosphorus? I came late on the call and I should read it. Okay, so basically there's different types of phosphorus we use. Phosphorus acid is the most common one that we use for tree applications. I tend to just call it phosphorus as an overview, but phosphorus, you have your phosphorus that you find in fertilizers, you have your phosphorus acid that we find in most of our more concentrated forms that we use for like tree injection or bark sprays or something of that nature. So hopefully that answers that question.
So there is a difference in terms of effect, like you don't apply the phosphorus in the fertilizer. That's not the same as what you're applying on the tree. Totally different, right?
Totally different. Exactly. So,
okay.
And it's partly because of how it's broken down and absorbed. So say you took a 040 and you made it soluble and you tried to spray it on the bark of the tree, you are not going to get the same effect. It is two different types of phosphorus, two different formulations of phosphorus.
Okay. Yeah. Because I want to make that distinction because the phosphorus in the fertilizer is what usually causes the runoff into the rivers for the algae bloom and all that terrible stuff, right?
Yeah, and that's all the stuff that's, all over the news right now, right? So if anyone's seen us do any sort of drench of nutrients, like, wow, I don't know, guys. And we're like, oh. So yeah, soil injection is always good. But it is one of those things, phosphorus is one of the ones that can move off site and create problems. And all other states, except for the ones directly on the west, have what they call phosphorus blackout periods. You cannot apply phosphorus at certain times of year when there's a potential of rain and moving it off site. So that is something that may eventually come to California. But with that being said, that is limited to a fertilizer. So could we still do bark spray of phosphorus? By all means, yes. Trunk injection, yes. We just can't do the soil application. All right, let's see. So late spring and summer applications are pretty much a waste. I'm going to say that's for shortstop. I'm looking at the time. No?
Yeah, I think we were talking about the phosphorus applications on, I think it was like sycamores. And I was just trying to figure out timing, because I know I've seen proposals and I've seen applications done on proposals that have kind of gone like at all different times of year. So just in terms of what we're communicating to our clients in terms of effectiveness and what we recommend is the best approach, best practice.
So best approach, best practice is like usually fall, early spring, if we're going after things like anthracnose or we're going after Botrytis canker. The only time we'll vary our timing on doing a phosphorus application is when we're kind of going after a Phytophthora. We've just walked onto the site. It might be the middle of summer. You're like, oh, look, I see the infection. We should treat it. I hesitate to say doing summer applications of phosphorus. And there's two reasons. One, if you don't have good vascular movement, so maybe it's an oak tree, it's kind of got its summer dormancy going, and you do an injection of phosphorus, it's not going to move out of that area. And then it's prone to crystallization, which is now clogging and doing damage on your vascular tissue. Same thing when we do with a bark spray. A lot of times if we do bark spray and say we get out there, 8 o'clock in the morning, we do our bark spray, the trunk's wet, sun comes up, beats on it. It actually causes the chemical to degrade and crystallize and not absorb through that bark tissue, and it gets stuck basically in the bark tissue. So we do try to avoid doing any sort of phosphorus applications in hot temperatures if we can avoid it. If I have a sycamore tree that's in a nice overwatered park, by all means, knock yourself out middle of summer, go for it. It's one of those situations, we know it's not going to crystallize, we know it's going to move, there's plenty of water to move the vascular tissue, you don't have an issue. But that's just one of those things that we do kind of point out and mention when dealing with phosphorus products. So
yeah, I guess I do have another quick question. Just when it comes to applying phosphorus to palms, I mean, we're not going to do soil drench because we kind of covered that. But then are we just looking at trunk injection at that point, or can you still do like a stem spray?
So that's the fun part about palms being monocots. The stem sprays are pretty ineffective. And it's just because you have the pseudobark and then you have the cortex layer. And when we do our spray applications, it goes in through the pseudobark and into the cortex. And that's about it. So we don't get the effect of it getting to that vascular bundle in it and then getting that stimulation effect we're looking for. So if you want to shy away from doing bark injections and you have a lift or something, by all means, you can do petiole injections. Just most people tend to avoid doing petiole injections because it requires getting all the way up to the petiole. But it's that same effect. You just need to get that high dose, that high concentration in all at once to get that stimulating effect. So when it comes to palms, I pretty much advocate for, the trunk injection of it, because then you're getting that full effect. If you're going after like something like a pink rot or a black diamond scale where you need that real trigger. but not too many. Most of our palms that we deal with outside of black diamond scale and pink rot, we're usually using something more along the lines of a fungistat to go after fusarium and things of that nature.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So this would be the essential combo, right? Sarah, essential,
yeah, so-
essential.
yeah, so-
I know, growth
yeah,
products,
so
essential.
You were talking about adding micronutrients to the application of phosphorus acid. And so we have our combos, and that's one of them. We do a bark spray and then a soil drench, or we drench them both in the soil. So would that be like what you're talking about, macronutrients?
Yeah, so micronutrients. So essential plus has micronutrients in it. I'm pretty
Yes,
positive.
it has a ton of stuff. So
I'm
I'm
trying to
assuming that
remember-
covers all the bases.
Yep, as long as it's
Okay.
got the full pack, you're good to go.
All right.
It's a tree application, so keep that in mind. That's what I was talking about kind of at the end. It's kind of like NutriRoot, same idea. Whereas that mic drop is super chelated, so it's going to absorb a lot faster. So if you have that known issue, you might want to use something that's going to be available much faster to trigger with it.
Okay, I think that's the, we have another one that's similar to the essential. It's another drench that we use. Same line of products though. I forget
Perfect.
what it's called now. Yeah. Okay.
I think everything at Growth Products is all pretty much tree oriented, so they'll have a slower breakdown time. And keep in mind, we're having problems right now with Growth Products. I'm giving you the heads up now. They're going more ag. So we're having a hard time getting the turf and ornamental products. Like they've pretty much gotten rid of Grow Pro, that's gone. They just can't make it anymore, the plant that they purchased. So we're seeing an issue with some of those products being available going forward. So keep that in the back of your mind. Buy up now what you can.
Well, let us know, or let me know. I know, I'm sure I'll talk to you or Eric, like when that happens and what we would switch to. So we'll have that discussion too.
Sounds wonderful. All right, let's see. And that's my default for fungus treatments. I'm going to say 913. I'm going to say plant growth regulator is your default for fungus treatments. Yeah.
That was Leo. I think he was talking about the micronutrients and the phosphorus.
Oh, okay, then yes. That is exactly what we do. So yeah, no, it sounds perfect. Sounds like you guys are right on track. So if you guys come up with any other questions or have any clarifications you would like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to help and make any clarifications needed or help identify anything if needed.
Yeah. Thank you so
Sorry,
much,
and
Dawn. Oh, go
Ask
ahead.
one more quick question.
Go for it.
What can we do about pink rot?
So pink rot, start cultural. Make sure you have good airflow through the canopy. So keep overlapping fronds out, keep other trees out. Make sure you don't have any secondary or parasitic plants growing in your palm. Make sure you keep rodents out of the palm. And then the phosphorus application to help support that, the healing of the tree. So yes.
Thanks, Dawn.
Not a problem. All right. I think Sarah, you wanted to say something and we're good. I think we lost her.
I think she has another meeting. She hopped off the call.
Oh, I'm